Hello, my name is Dick Fleming. I was a member of 1st Force Recon and Recon Battalion during the Vietnam War. I tell my stories in a book I wrote called Chasing Charlie, which is available on Amazon. I also have a website called firstforcerecon.com where I have additional photographs that people have sent me over the years, or I took myself during my time in Vietnam. So you might be interested in that URL as well, firstforcerecon.com. My story today is about a prisoner snatch. And prisoner snatches were among the most dangerous of our missions for obvious reasons. We were trying to get a North Vietnamese officer, if possible. We were going to ambush him on a trail that a previous team had discovered running between two base camps. And for this mission, we were going to go with a double team. Instead of 6 to 7 or 8 men, we'd have about 12 men. And in order to do that, we'd need to bring in additional resources from other teams. That had its pluses and minuses. I mean, you know, the more people you have, the more difficult it is to remain silent. But the main problem is that we weren't used to working together. Usually they would pick men from other teams that were experienced in the bush, and that was a good thing. But again, we had little communication with the other members of the other teams, and we had limited opportunity to practice with them. So we didn't know their capabilities, and they didn't know ours. And in my mind, it wasn't a very good idea. You know, at the very least, you know, we should have been training with the same people over and over and over again instead of having randomly people assigned to us. But of course, no one asked for my opinion, which is a real shame because you know, the enlisted men have the most experience in the field. You know, they would, I'm sure, have lots of suggestions that would have made the missions more effective and reduced casualties. You know, just because someone has silver, you know, has insignias on their shoulders as being an officer, doesn't mean that they have all the answers or even most of the answers. Actually, from my perspective, the papasan who was cutting our hair, you know, and he probably had more experience than any one of us in the company. You know, the Vietnamese have been fighting the Japanese, the French, and now the North Vietnamese, or if they weren't part of the North Vietnamese, you know, for 100 years. You know, this guy cutting our hair probably, you know, knew more about guerrilla warfare than any of us. But you know, but Americans have that ego that we know better, and you know, it's breathtaking. You know, our that egotism. You know, of the Westerner coming into a foreign country and thinking that he knows all the answers. I'm getting off my subject, though. I always like to vent a little bit. So anyway, so we were briefed on this mission, and I guess we had about 12 men in our team, and we knew our objective, and we had trained that week, you know, on different ways to extract the prisoner, and you know, we had done that a number of times, and we had it down pretty pat. But on a prisoner snatch, you never know what's going to happen. You're always surprised. So we went out together, and this time we were inserted clandestinely, silently. And the reason I mention that is because sometimes when you went in, the air team would rocket the area you were going into to destroy any chance of an ambush. And they also did it because the Vietnamese were getting more, North Vietnamese were getting more sophisticated in stopping these insertions. They would put long bamboo poles up into the air and string fish line between them with grenades on all ends of the poles. So when a helicopter came down, it would explode all of the grenades and bring down the helicopter. But they would blast if the Hueys came in, the gunships came in and blasted that area. That would destroy that. But of course, that amount of firepower, that noise would alert the North Vietnamese to our presence. So in this case, we went in without any rocketing of the area beforehand. You know, it was a trade-off. I mean, we prefer to go in silently almost always, but the air wing would prefer to rocket everything beforehand to make sure it was secure. So, you know, you have two conflicting ideas there as to who's going to make it safer for whom. But in any case, we went in, we were inserted without any problem, and we were getting ready to set up our ambush, and we had formed our defensive perimeter at night, and with 12 men, with six men, you have a relatively small circle of defensive perimeter. You can easily communicate in whispers, you know, between everybody in that smaller group. When you get out to 12 men, it becomes very difficult to communicate. You know, that makes a big circle, 12 men facing outward like that. And the reason I mention that is because it has a bearing on what happened a little bit later in this particular mission. So we were settling in there for the night, and this team, our team, was led by a relatively new lieutenant. I'll call him Lieutenant Rich. Relatively new. I hadn't worked with lieutenant or any officers very much at all. They were a different species to me in a way. I had always gone out with sergeants before, but this lieutenant was in charge of our team, and I didn't see any problem with him. He seemed like he knew what he was doing, but I was surprised when he came over to me because I happened to be right by him. And he started asking me, like, in whispers, you know, well, what's your name? And I told him, Lance Corporal Fleming, sir. You know, and he said, where are you from? Well, you know, the bush isn't a place where you hold a conversation like that. We didn't hardly talk at all, or even whisperly, you know. It was, and if we did, it was just related to the mission at hand. You know, it wasn't a good time to be chit-chatting out there in the bush. Takes your mind off what the hell you're doing, you're supposed to be doing. But it was a nice gesture. I don't deny it. It made me feel good, you know. You pat the dog on the head a little bit once in a while, you know, he gets to like you. Well, anyway, so we were settling in for the night, and the lieutenant told one of the men, I'll call him Stout, to go out. One of the men from our team to go out and set up some claymore. Well, that Stout had been with us a very short time. He was a new guy in the team. And I withheld my judgment about him because I didn't know what he was capable of, but I just knew he was a new guy. So he was actually on the other side of our defensive perimeter, and he went out. We were told that he went out, and we were expecting that he'd come back the same way that he went out. but he was out there, and Grant was right next to me in the perimeter. And Grant suddenly said, he gave us the signal, alert signal, and of course, everybody, I got my rifle ready, and he had his right on his shoulder. We were laying down together. I saw the bush move over on the side there, and Grant fired a single shot, and I was almost ready to fire. I don't know why I didn't. I don't know why I didn't fire. Just I hesitated for a minute. I couldn't see. I saw the bush moving, but I didn't know what it was. And Grant fired, and I held off. And Grant had hit that guy Stout right high in his chest there. And we found, and of course, we dragged him back. And he had, instead of coming back the same way that he had gone out, which is what he should have done, for some reason he came back on our side. Maybe he was thinking he was going to join most of us, which were, more of us that were on that one side. I don't know what he was thinking, if he was thinking anything at all. Maybe he just got confused, and it's easy to do in the jungle. You can't really see more than 10 feet. Maybe he just lost his bearing for a minute and came back on the opposite side that he went out on. Well, my God, he's laying there on the ground, and he can barely talk and hardly breathe, and foam is coming out of his mouth. And the medic, rolls him over on the side, where he was hit, because if you move him on the other side, the lung is going to fill up with blood and fluid. You got to do that. And he he had a sucking chest wound, is what we called it, and the medic put a plastic dressing to stop the lung from collapsing. And of course, we called in for a medevac. Well, the helicopter comes in, and it lowers one of those metal cages, and we put Stout in there, and the helicopter winched him up through the trees and took off. Well, our mission had been compromised. It had been compromised twice. First the shot, and then the extraction. So, we immediately knew that we had to get out of there. We had to be extracted. And fortunately, we weren't too far away from where we had been inserted. So we went back, went back, and there was a rice paddy there, an overgrown rice paddy. We called in for the C-46. We popped our smoke flares, and we were extracted out. Well, about a week later, I heard that the Lieutenant Rich, had fallen from a jungle penetrator, and had been killed. And I heard a number of stories about that how that happened. And of course, if you listen to my videos at all, I hated those jungle penetrators. But apparently, he was he was on the jungle penetrator with another man. And as I said before, when that thing comes up, it's unbalanced, and he wasn't a very big guy. And the other man who was with him was fairly big. And when that happens, the jungle penetrator is unbalanced, and apparently he slid off the seat of the jungle penetrator, which is very easy to do because it's twisting it's twisting like this, in the prop blast, and you know, unless you're right up there and can find a way to clip on quickly, when that thing takes off, sometimes you don't have time to clip on. You just hang on. You don't have time to be fiddling around and getting a carabiner so you can hook onto something. In any case, you got to take the damn thing off usually when you get up to the helicopter anyway. So what I heard, and whether or not it's true or not, is that he had slipped off the seat and now was hanging on the around the body or the legs of the other man, and then he fell. Well, I had limited experience with that guy, but I can't help but wonder if he just let go because he didn't want to pull the other man off of the jungle penetrator, and he might have heard or felt that he was the other man was slipping off, and he didn't want to be pulling him off as well. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but I think it's a strong possibility. And if so, it was an act of tremendous heroism. But, you know, to prove one way or another, you know, I don't know. And really, does it really matter? Does it really matter now to his family or at the time? Maybe it would, you know, to know that your son died a hero like that. In any case, if he did do it intentionally, you know, to save another man from being pulled off of that jungle penetrator, well, that's something. So that's my story. Vietnam, 1968.